Ethan Walker snapped his toolbox shut. The sound cracked across that marble floor like a rifle shot, and every laugh in the room died in a person's throat. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even turn around all the way. "No problem," he said. "You don't have to pay me a dime." Then he looked back at the woman in the $8,000 suit. "But your $5 million car never moves again." 22 people laughed at him on his way out the door. 10 hours later, not one of them was laughing. And what none of them knew, what even she didn't know yet, was that his fingerprints were already inside that car. They had been for 11 years. Before we go on, do me a favor. Tell me what city you're watching from down in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. And if you believe a man's worth isn't stitched on his shirt, hit subscribe and stay with me. This one's worth the whole ride. Sterling Motors headquarters was the kind of building that made a man check his boots before he walked in. Ethan Walker didn't check his boots. He'd earned every stain on them. He'd been standing on that showroom floor for 51 minutes without touching the car, and the room had gone from curious to impatient to openly hostile. "Is he going to do anything?" someone whispered near the back. "He's looking at it," another voice whispered back. "For an hour. He's looking at it. My kid looks at cars. I don't pay my kid." Ethan heard all of it. He always heard all of it. That was the thing people never understood about quiet men. They weren't deaf. They were just done arguing. He walked another slow circle around the hypercar. Low black, wide as a boat. 280 engineers had touched this machine. 6 software firms. 3 consultants flown in from Stuttgart on a private jet that cost more than Ethan's shop was worth, and it sat there dead as a stone. He crouched by the rear quarter panel and put his ear close not to the body, but to the seam. He tapped it twice with a knuckle. Listened. Tapped again. "Sir?" A young engineer with a tablet stepped forward, voice tight. "The diagnostic port is on the other side." "I know where the port is." "Then, ports tell you what the car wants you to hear." Ethan stood up, wiping his palms on his jeans. "I'm listening to what it's trying not to say." Somebody snorted. That was when the elevator opened. Victoria Sterling walked in like weather. 32 years old, CEO of a company her father had built, and she had rebuilt, and she had the walk of a woman who had never once been told to wait in a lobby. 2 assistants trailed her. A third man walked beside her, silver at the temples, expensive glasses, the easy smile of a man who had never been the one to get bad news. Marcus Hale, Chief Technical Officer. "Talk to me," Victoria said before she'd even stopped walking. "Nothing," Marcus said smoothly. "Same as this morning, same as yesterday. We've replaced the battery management module twice, flashed the firmware 3 times, pulled the inverter." "I asked for a solution, Marcus, not a receipt." "And I brought you one." Marcus turned and gestured toward Ethan the way a man gestures at a dog that's wandered into a wedding. "This is Ethan Walker, independent shop out on Route 71. He's very well thought of, locally." Victoria's eyes moved to Ethan for the first time. He watched her take him in. The gray t-shirt, the grease under the fingernails that no soap on earth was ever going to lift. The steel toolbox by his foot, dented 40 years old, his father's initials still scratched inside the lid. He watched her decide who he was in about a second and a half. She'd been doing that her whole career, reading a room fast. It had made her a fortune. Nobody had ever told her what it had cost her. "You're the mechanic," she said. "I'm the mechanic. And you've been standing here for an hour, 53 minutes. Doing what exactly?" Ethan looked at the car, then back at her. "Ma'am, when your daughter's sick, does the doctor start cutting, or does he ask questions first?" The room went very quiet. Victoria's head tilted a fraction of an inch. "I don't have a daughter." "I do." Ethan nodded once. "So I'll ask the questions first." Here's what none of them knew. 36 hours earlier, Ethan Walker had been flat on his back under a 2009 Silverado with 280,000 miles on it, arguing with an 11-year-old about pizza. "Dad, it's Friday." "It's Thursday." "It's Friday somewhere." "That's not how days work, Soph." Sophie Walker sat cross-legged on an upturned milk crate homework on her knees, doing exactly zero homework. Mrs. Alvarez said the field trip money is due Monday. Ethan's hands stopped moving under the truck. $42. That was the field trip. $42, and he'd already moved it twice on the calendar in his head, once past the water bill, once past the insurance. Monday, he said. Got it. You said that last time. And you went, didn't you? A pause. Yeah. Then trust the process. That was when the shop phone rang. Ethan rolled out, wiped his hands, and picked it up on the fourth ring. Walker Auto. Mr. Walker. A young woman's voice clipped reading off a script. Please hold for Marcus Hale, Chief Technical Officer of Sterling Motors. Ethan looked at the phone like it had spoken French. Then a man's voice came on. Warm. Too warm. Ethan, Marcus Hale, how's business? Slow enough to answer the phone. Marcus laughed, a big hollow laugh, the kind men use as a handshake. Straight shooter, I like it. Listen, I'm going to be very direct with you because I think you're a direct guy. We have a situation over here. A vehicle. A very expensive vehicle. And we've got the finest minds in the industry looking at it, but the CEO, you understand, she wants to say she's turned over every stone. So I'm a stone. A beat of silence on the line. You're a second opinion, Marcus said, recovering. There's a difference. Not much of one. Look. The warmth thinned out. It's 4 hours of your time. We'll pay your hourly. 200, let's say, generous for a shop your size. You come in, you look at it, you shake your head, you go home. Everybody's happy. Ethan sat down slowly on the stool by the register. You want me to come look at it, he said, and not fix it. I want you to come look at it, Marcus said, and confirm what my team already knows. That's all. That's the job. Behind Ethan, Sophie had stopped pretending to do homework. Ethan stared at the wall. At the framed photo hanging crooked above the register, himself at 27, hair still dark, standing in a clean white lab with 4 other engineers and a whiteboard behind them covered in equations. He hadn't looked at that photo in a long time. What kind of vehicle? He asked. Electric. Prototype. That's all I can say. Which platform? Another pause. Longer this time. Why? Because if it's built on a distributed thermal load architecture, Ethan said, your team's not going to find it, and neither is Stuttgart. The silence on that line lasted 4 full seconds. Ethan had spent enough years around men like Marcus Hale to know exactly what 4 seconds of silence meant. It meant, how the hell do you know that? 8 a.m. Marcus said finally, and his voice had gone flat as a table. Front desk, don't be late. The line clicked dead. Sophie was watching him. Who was that? Ethan set the phone down. Somebody who thinks he's smarter than me. Is he? Ethan almost smiled. Not today. They made him wait 40 minutes in the lobby. Not because anyone was busy, because that's what lobbies are for in buildings like that. A man in a gray t-shirt with a steel toolbox on his knees, sitting under a 15-foot photograph of a car he wasn't allowed to touch. The security guard came over twice. Sir, deliveries are around the east side. I'm not a delivery. Sir. I'm on the list. Walker. The guard checked, frowned, checked again. Walker. Ethan. That's me. The guard's face did something complicated. Huh. Okay. Somebody'll be down. They came down at 8:41. A young man named Trent with a lanyard and an air of enormous inconvenience who walked fast and didn't look back once to see if Ethan was keeping up. So you do like transmissions? Trent asked in the elevator. Some. This is a little different from transmissions. Some, Ethan said again. Trent nodded, satisfied he'd made his point. The elevator climbed. And now here he was. 53 minutes into the strangest inspection of his life, with a CEO staring at him and 22 engineers waiting for him to embarrass himself. Victoria crossed her arms. All right, Mr. Walker, you've had your hour. Tell me what you see. Ethan stepped to the front of the car. I see a machine that's been beaten half to death by people trying to save it." A ripple of noise went through the room. Marcus's smile got very small. "Excuse me. Your team's replaced the battery management module twice." Ethan pointed without touching. Fresh torque marks on the bolts. 2 different tool signatures, so 2 different people, working 2 different days, probably arguing with each other in between. "You've pulled the inverter. There's a scuff on the mount that's 4 days old. You've flashed the software at least 3 times, and every time you flashed it, the car got worse, not better. Which is why you kept flashing it." Victoria's arms came uncrossed. "How could you possibly?" "Because that's what men do when they're scared," Ethan said. "They do the same thing harder." Nobody laughed at that one. "The failure isn't in the parts," he went on. "Every part in this car is fine. You could pull every module out of it right now and bench test them, and they'd all come back green. That's what's been driving your people insane for 3 weeks. Everything works. Nothing works together." He finally looked away from the car and directly at Victoria Sterling. "Your car isn't broken, man. Your car is confused, and you can't fix confused by replacing parts. You have to go back to the moment it stopped agreeing with itself." The room was dead silent now. Marcus Hale stepped forward, and his voice was smooth as ice on a road. "That's a lovely piece of poetry. It's not a diagnosis." "No," Ethan agreed. "It's not. That's why I'd need to run a full diagnostic process. 16 to 20 hours, my equipment, my sequence, nobody touching the vehicle while I work." "And what does that cost?" Victoria asked. Ethan reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded invoice book, the paper kind with the carbon copy underneath. He clicked a pen, wrote for 6 seconds, tore the top sheet off and held it out. Victoria took it. She read it. And then something happened to her face that Ethan would remember for a long time afterward. She laughed. Not a polite laugh. A short, sharp, disbelieving bark of a laugh, the kind that escapes before a person can decide whether to let it. $899, she read out loud. Marcus's eyebrows climbed. $899. To inspect my car, Victoria said. $899 to look at it. And then the room broke open. They laughed. God, how they laughed. 22 people who had just spent $4 million of company money failing to start a car, laughing at a number smaller than the dinner they'd expensed the night before. "That's more than my first car cost," someone called out. "Does that include the toolbox? Hey, does he take Discover?" Marcus Hale laughed loudest of all, one hand on his stomach wiping at his eye. Ethan, buddy, I told you 200 an hour. I was being generous." "You were being cheap," Ethan said. "There's a difference." That got another wave. Victoria held up the invoice, still smiling, and there was something almost kind in the way she said it, which was the worst part. She wasn't being cruel. She genuinely thought she was doing him a favor. "Mr. Walker, I appreciate you coming out. I do. But let me explain something about this room. That gentleman there." She pointed. 15 years at Lockheed. That woman. She wrote the thermal control code for 2 satellites currently in orbit. The 3 men who flew in Tuesday charged $900 an hour, and I paid it without blinking because that's what real expertise costs. She lowered the paper. "So when a man walks into my building in a t-shirt and hands me a handwritten invoice for $899, you'll forgive me for wondering what exactly I'd be paying for." "You'd be paying," Ethan said, "for the only person in this room who knows what's wrong with it." The laughter stopped like a switch had been thrown. Victoria's chin lifted. "Say that again." "You heard me fine. You've been here 1 hour." "That's right. They've been here 3 weeks. That's the problem." Marcus took a step forward. "All right, that's enough." "Marcus." Victoria didn't look at him. "Be quiet." He stopped. She walked toward Ethan slowly, the invoice still in her hand, and stopped about 4 feet away. Up close, she was smaller than she'd seemed. Up close, Ethan could see what the last 3 weeks had done to her, the makeup covering the sleeplessness, the tension living permanently in her jaw. She had 72 hours until the global reveal. 900 journalists. $200 million in pre-orders. A board of directors that had already started using the word contingency in emails she wasn't copied on. She was drowning, and she was too proud to look like it. "Prove it," she said quietly. "Right now, for free. Tell me what's wrong with my car, and I'll write you a check for 10 times that number." And Ethan Walker looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. Victoria blinked. "No, no ma'am. I just offered you $9,000. You offered me a test." Ethan bent down and picked up his toolbox. "There's a difference. You want me to hand you the answer for free, so you can decide afterward whether I was worth paying. That's not a job. That's an audition. Everyone auditions. Not for me." He straightened up. "My father worked 41 years fixing other men's machines. He never once got to name his own price. He asked what they thought was fair, and they told him, and he took it, and he came home and did the numbers at the kitchen table with the lights off to save on the bill." Ethan's voice didn't rise, not once. "I promised him something when he died. $8.99 isn't a negotiation, Miss Sterling. It's what the work is worth. If it's not worth that to you, then it isn't worth that to you, and there's no hard feelings in it." Victoria stared at him. For a second, half a second, something moved behind her eyes. Something that wasn't CEO. Then Marcus Hale laughed. One short, ugly syllable. "Unbelievable," he said. "Victoria, we're 72 hours out, and we're standing here getting a sermon from a guy who does brake pads on Route 71. And that was it. That was the moment." Victoria's face closed like a door. "Trent," she said, "show Mr. Walker out, and validate his parking, since apparently we're in the business of charity today." The laughter came back smaller now, meaner, the kind that follows a decision instead of causing one. Ethan nodded. He'd expected it. He'd expected it from the moment the phone rang. He snapped the toolbox shut. That sound, that hard metal crack, went across the marble floor like a gunshot, and every laugh in the room died in a person's throat. "No problem," Ethan said. "You don't have to pay me a dime." He turned toward the door. Then he stopped and looked back at her. "But then your $5 million car never moves again." For one long beat, nobody moved. Then Marcus Hale started laughing, and this time the whole room went with him, roaring, howling, somebody actually applauding. And Ethan Walker walked out through the sound of it with his father's toolbox in his hand and his back straight as a fence post. I didn't slam the door. Men who are right don't need to slam doors. Sophie was doing homework at the kitchen table when he got home, which meant she was watching the door. Well, what? Did you fix the secret car?" Ethan set the toolbox down by the wall, hung his keys on the nail. "Nope. Couldn't figure it out. Figured it out in about 40 minutes. He opened the fridge. They didn't want to pay for it." Sophie put her pencil down. "How much did you ask for?" $8.99. Her eyes went wide. "Dad, that's a lot." "It's what it's worth." "But they laughed at you." Ethan closed the fridge and stood there a second with his hand still on the door. He was 38 years old. He had $411 in checking. He had a $42 field trip due Monday and a transmission job that wasn't going to pay until the 15th. And that morning, a woman with a private elevator had laughed in his face over a number that would have covered every single one of those problems. He could feel it sitting in his chest. He wasn't a saint. It hurt. But he turned around and looked at his daughter, and he said the only thing worth saying. "Soph, come here a second." She came. "Somebody's going to laugh at you someday," he said. "For something you're good at. Something you know you're good at. It's going to happen, and it's going to burn." "What do I do?" "Nothing." She frowned. "Nothing. You don't argue. You don't beg. You don't chase them down the hall waving your resume." Ethan crouched down so they were eye to eye. "You say your price, you say it once, and then you go home and you eat dinner with your kid. Because people who don't respect your value..." He tapped the table. "Time teaches them. It always does. You don't have to." Sophie thought about that for a while in the serious way 11-year-olds do. "That's a nice speech," she said, "but we still don't have $800. Ethan laughed, really laughed for the first time all day. "No, he said. "We surely do not." 11 miles away, on the 41st floor, Victoria Sterling was still in the building at 11:20 that night. She stood alone on the showroom floor with the lights half down, looking at $5 million worth of nothing. She'd had the team run it again at 6. Nothing. Again at 8. Nothing. Marcus had gone home at 9, patting her shoulder, telling her they were close, telling her the Stuttgart team had a new theory about the coolant loop. She'd nodded. She'd smiled. She'd said goodnight. Then she'd stood here for 2 hours. The invoice was still in her jacket pocket. She'd meant to throw it away. She kept not throwing it away. She pulled it out now and unfolded it under the low light. Full diagnostic sequence. $899. And underneath, in small, careful block letters, a line she hadn't noticed in the room. A line she hadn't been looking for because she'd already decided what kind of man had written it. Note: do not attempt further software flashes. Each one moves the calibration further from origin. Every hour you wait costs more than this invoice. Victoria read it 4 times. She thought about a man in a gray t-shirt saying your car is confused, and you can't fix confused by replacing parts, and you have to go back to the moment it stopped agreeing with itself. She thought about the way Marcus Hale had laughed a half-second too fast. She looked at the dead car, and for the first time in 3 weeks, Victoria Sterling felt a cold, thin thread of something she had not allowed herself to feel since her father's funeral. What if he was right? At 6:15 the next morning, her phone rang. It was the floor supervisor, and his voice was wrong. "Miss Sterling, you need to come in." She was already sitting up. "Did it start?" A pause. "No, ma'am, it's worse. Overnight the whole system it locked out. Every module. It won't even accept a diagnostic handshake anymore. It's like it just stopped answering." Victoria was silent. "Ma'am, Marcus authorized one more flash last night after you left. He said what? He said it couldn't hurt." Victoria Sterling closed her eyes. And in a small garage out on Route 71, a man in a gray t-shirt was already up, coffee in hand, packing a lunch for a girl who had a field trip on Monday, with absolutely no idea that in about 9 hours, the most powerful woman in Texas was going to be standing in his doorway. At 6:41 that morning, Victoria Sterling stood on the showroom floor in yesterday's clothes and looked at a car that no longer answered when spoken to. "Say it again," she said. The floor supervisor, a heavy-set man named Dale, who had worked for her father before her, held the tablet like it might bite him. "Every module's locked out. Battery management, thermal drive controller, all of it. They're powered. They're awake. They just won't talk. Not to us, not to each other." "Since when?" "Since about 11:50 last night." Victoria did the arithmetic in her head and did not like the answer. "I left at 11:30. "Yes, ma'am. And Marcus flashed it at 11:40. Dale looked at the floor. 11:43. There was a long silence on that showroom floor, and in it, Victoria Sterling heard a sentence she had been given for free the day before and had thrown in the trash. "Do not attempt further software flashes." She pulled the folded invoice out of her jacket pocket. She hadn't taken the jacket off. She hadn't slept in it either exactly, but she'd sat in it until 3 in the morning in a chair in her office with the lights off, which amounted to the same thing. Dale. "Ma'am, how long have you been in this building?" 26 years. "In 26 years have you ever seen a vehicle do this?" Dale thought about it honestly, which was one of the reasons her father had kept him. "No, ma'am. I've seen 'em dead. I've never seen one refuse." Victoria nodded slowly. "That's the word, isn't it? Refuse." At 7:15, the executive floor started filling up. And by 7:30, the whole thing had gone from an engineering problem to a political one, which is what always happens in buildings that expensive. Marcus Hale arrived at 7:52 with 2 coffees and a smile, and he set one of the coffees down in front of her, like a peace offering from a man who did not yet understand there was a war. "Rough night," he said. "You flashed the car." "I authorized a corrective patch, yes. The Stuttgart team drafted it. I signed off. That's my job, Victoria. That's literally the job description. After I went home. You'd been here 19 hours. I wasn't going to wake you up for a firmware push. He pulled out a chair, sat down, crossed one ankle over his knee. And frankly, if it had worked, we'd be having a very different conversation. You'd be thanking me. It didn't work. No, it didn't. It made it worse. It made it different, Marcus said. Which in a diagnostic environment is not the same thing as worse. When a system changes state, you learn something. Victoria stared at him for 4 full seconds. What did we learn, Marcus? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That's what I thought, she said. At 8:20, she called the entire engineering group onto the showroom floor and told them what she had never once told them in 4 years, which was that she did not know what to do. I'm going to say something and I want you to hear it as permission and not as a threat, she said. As of this morning, I do not have a plan. I have 68 hours and I do not have a plan. So I need somebody in this room to stop protecting their department and start telling me the truth. 111 people looked at their shoes. Then a hand went up in the back. A woman, maybe 30, hair tied back badge that said, Priya Raman Systems Integration. Ma'am, she said, can I ask something that's going to sound rude? Please. Why did we send the mechanic home? The room got very still. Marcus said, Priya. No, Victoria said. Let her talk. Priya swallowed. I was standing about 10 feet from him yesterday. He looked at that car for 50 minutes, and then he told us 3 things. He told us the failure wasn't in the parts. He told us every module would bench test green. And he told us the car stopped agreeing with itself at a specific moment in the past. She lifted her chin. Ma'am, I've been on this vehicle 19 days. I have never once said any of those 3 things out loud, and all 3 of them are things I believe. Then why didn't you say them? Priya glanced at Marcus. Just a flick. Half a second. She said, it wasn't my place. Victoria heard the flick more clearly than she heard the sentence. By 9 o'clock, the money started moving, and it moved the way money always moves in a panic, which is fast and stupid. They chartered a jet. $94,000 to bring in a battery systems specialist from Palo Alto, who arrived at 2 in the afternoon, worked until midnight, and told them the battery was fine. They bought a complete replacement drive unit off the tooling line. $460,000 because it was a prototype, and there were only 3 in existence, and one of them was in a crash sled. They hired a forensic software firm out of Boston at $1,100 an hour that billed 40 hours in 2 days and produced a 19-page report whose entire conclusion was that the calibration profile did not match the reference profile, which was a very expensive way of saying something changed, and we don't know when. By Wednesday night, the number had crossed $2 million. By Thursday morning, it had crossed 3. And every single time they touched it, the car got quieter. It's like arguing with a man who's already decided, Dale said at one point watching the Boston team pack up. The more you talk, the less he says. At 4:10 on Wednesday afternoon, the first article went up. It was 3 paragraphs on a trade site. Nobody outside the industry read headlined, Sterling Reveal in Doubt as Prototype Issues Persist, and it cited 2 unnamed sources inside the company. Victoria read it standing up. Find out who talked, Marcus said. No. Victoria, this is a containment issue. It's a true story, Marcus. You can't contain a true story. You can only outrun it. She set the phone down. And we're not running very fast right now. By 6 that evening, the trade piece had been picked up by a business channel. By 8, there was video of the Sterling Motors building on cable news with a chyron underneath it that said, the $5 million question. By 10, the stock was down 11% in after hours, and her phone had 41 missed calls, 38 of which were from people who had been at her birthday party in March. At 10:40 p.m., the board chairman called. His name was Warren Pike. He was 73 years old. He'd been her father's roommate at Rice, and he had held her at her christening. Vicky. Warren. I'm going to talk to you like a man who loved your daddy. I'd rather you talked to me like a man who owns 8%. Same conversation, honey. He sighed, and it was a real sigh, the kind that comes from a chest that's seen things. Pull the reveal. Victoria stood up. No. Pull it. Say it's a scheduling matter. Take the hit. Take the jokes. Take 6 months. You'll survive 6 months. You will not survive standing on a stage in front of 900 reporters with a car that doesn't move. If I pull it, the pre-orders unwind. Some of them. $200 million, Warren. And if you don't pull it, and that car sits there dead on a live stream, Warren said, you don't lose $200 million. You lose the company. There's a difference, and your father knew it, and I need you to know it too. Victoria pressed her fingers into her eyes. I have a guy, she said. You have a guy. I had a guy. I had him in the building. She laughed, and there was nothing in it. I laughed at him, Warren. I stood in front of my whole engineering department, and I laughed at his invoice. A pause on the line. How much was the invoice? $899. The pause got longer. Vicky. Warren Pike said slowly. We have spent $3 million since Monday. I'm aware. $3 million. I'm aware, Warren. Then why in God's name are you on the phone with me? 11 miles away. Ethan Walker was under a 2000 Silverado, and the only crisis in his life was that the field trip money was due in 4 days and the transmission job hadn't cleared. Hand me the 3/8. Sophie handed him the 3/8. She'd been handing him wrenches since she was 6, and she almost never got it wrong anymore. Dad? Ryland's mom said Sterling Motors is on the news. That's so. She said their car is broken and they can't fix it, and the lady in charge is going to lose her job. Ethan kept working. People say a lot of things. Is it the same car? Probably. Sophie sat down on the milk crate. So you were right. Being right's not worth much by itself, Soph. Why not? Ethan slid out from under the truck, sat up and wiped his hands. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the truck. Because being right and being paid are two different roads, he said. And most people only ever hear about the first one. Are you mad? No. You're a little mad. I'm a little tired, Ethan said. There's a difference. He stood up and stretched his back. Get your shoes. We're going to the store. Can we get the good cereal? We can get the cereal that's on sale. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got, kid. At 11:20, Thursday morning. Victoria Sterling did something she had not done in 4 years, which was open her father's filing cabinet. She'd kept it. Not the files, the cabinet itself, a beige steel thing from 1988 that looked absurd against the glass and concrete of the 40th floor. Her design people had asked to remove it 11 separate times. She'd said no 11 separate times, and she'd never been able to explain why. She was looking for something specific. She was looking for the original program files on the thermal architecture, because at 3 in the morning, she had remembered a sentence, and it had not let her go. If it's built on a distributed thermal load architecture, your team's not going to find it. Marcus had mentioned that phone call, in passing, bragging almost about how he'd vetted the guy. He'd said the mechanic had guessed lucky. Victoria did not believe in lucky guesses. She had built an entire company on not believing in lucky guesses. The files were in the 3rd drawer in an accordion folder with her father's handwriting on the tab. Architecture Phase 1, 2015. She sat on the floor of her office in a $4,000 skirt and started reading. At 12:05, she found the first name that wasn't supposed to be there. It was a footnote. Page 211 of a technical appendix that had been scanned so poorly the page numbers were crooked. A citation, one line referencing a foundational paper on load distribution in multi-cell thermal environments. Walker E.A. et al. Thermal Load Distribution in Asymmetric Multi-Cell Architectures, 2014. Victoria stopped breathing for a second. She typed the paper title into her laptop. 6 results. All of them citing it, none of them hosting it. She typed the author's name. And that was when the floor went out from under her, because there were 41 papers by E.A. Walker between 2011 and 2016, and then there was nothing. Not a retirement, not an obituary, not a move to another firm, nothing. Like a man who had walked into a river. She called Priya Raman. I need you in my office. Bring your laptop. Don't tell Marcus. Priya was there in 6 minutes, and she did not ask a single question which told Victoria something. Do you know this name? Priya looked at the screen. Her face changed. That's ma'am. That's the walker. Meaning what? Meaning when I was doing my master's, we read that 2014 paper in 3 separate courses. It's the reason distributed thermal architecture exists. It's the thing everybody built on top of. Priya scrolled. I always assumed he was dead. He's not dead. Then where is he? Victoria said, Route 71. Priya looked up from the laptop very slowly. Ma'am, she said, are you telling me the guy in the t-shirt? I'm telling you, I need you to pull every internal document that references this citation, and I need you to do it from your personal account, and I need it in 90 minutes. Priya was already standing. It'll take 40. It took 31. At 1:14 p.m., Priya came back into the office and shut the door behind her, and she didn't sit down. You need to see the version history. On what? On everything. Priya set the laptop on the desk and turned it around. The Phase 1 architecture document. There are 14 revisions in the system. Revisions 1 through 9 list 4 principal contributors. Revision 10 lists 3. Victoria's mouth went dry. Who's missing? Walker E. When? March 11th, 2016. Who made the revision? Priya reached over and scrolled down one line and stopped with her finger on the trackpad. Hale M., she said. The office was very quiet. There's more, Priya said. Do you want more? Yes. There's an internal ethics complaint filed April 2016. Attribution dispute. It went to a review committee. Priya swallowed. The committee had 3 members. 2 engineering, 1 executive. The executive member signed off on dismissal. Marcus. Victoria sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling of the office her father had died in. He knew, she said. Ma'am. When he called that man out to Route 71 and offered him $200 an hour to come look at a car and go home. Victoria's voice was very level. He knew exactly who he was calling. He didn't find a mechanic. He found him. And he brought him in here in front of me and introduced him as a guy who does brake pads. Priya said nothing. I wanted me to laugh, Victoria said. That's the part. He didn't bring him in to help. He brought him in so I would humiliate him in front of 111 people and never call him again. Why would he? Because if that man opens that car, Victoria said, he finds out who broke it. At 2:30, Marcus Hale walked into her office without knocking, which he had done 400 times, and it had never once registered until that afternoon. Good news, he said. Stuttgart's got a hardware theory. They think it's the harness. If we pull the harness tonight. Marcus. We're looking at maybe 14 hours, which is tight, but... Marcus, sit down. He sat because something in her voice was new. March 2016, Victoria said. Tell me what happened. She watched it. She watched a man's face do the thing faces do when a door opens somewhere behind them. You're going to have to be more specific. E.A. Walker. Marcus laughed. It was half a beat late and 1 note too high, and Victoria heard the whole thing. Oh, come on. March 11th, 2016. Revision 10. Victoria. He leaned forward, hands open, warm, reasonable. That was a documentation cleanup. That was 10 years ago. We had contributors listed on that architecture doc who'd touched it for a week. It was a mess. I trimmed it. You trimmed one name. I trimmed the ones that weren't material. 41 published papers isn't material. Marcus's jaw moved. He was difficult. He was arrogant. He blew up $100 million timeline because he wouldn't sign off on a thermal tolerance he didn't like, and half the engineering department wanted him gone. And your father? He stopped. Victoria went very still. My father what? Nothing. My father what, Marcus? Your father liked him, Marcus said flatly. Your father liked him a great deal, which made it very difficult to have a rational conversation about whether he was worth what he cost us. Victoria stood up. Get out. Victoria. Get out of my office. He stood. He straightened his jacket. And at the door he turned around and the warmth was gone from his face entirely. And what was underneath it was something Victoria had worked beside for 11 years and never once seen. "You're 62 hours out," Marcus said quietly. "You want to go to war with your CTO, that's your right. But when that car sits dead on that stage on Saturday, it's not going to be my name on the wire, honey. It's going to be Sterling." He closed the door softly. Victoria stood in the middle of her office and shook. Then she picked up her phone. At 3:48 that afternoon, a black car that cost more than the building it parked in front of pulled into a gravel lot on Route 71, and the woman who got out of it was alone. No assistance, no security, no Marcus. Sophie saw her first through the open bay door. "Dad?" There's a lady. Tell her we close at 6. "Dad." Ethan slid out from under the Silverado and looked up. Victoria Sterling was standing at the edge of his shop with her heels sinking half an inch into the gravel, holding a folded piece of paper in her hand. And for a woman who owned a building with a private elevator, she looked like somebody's kid on the first day at a new school. Ethan stood up, wiped his hands, didn't say anything. "Mr. Walker?" "Miss Sterling. I'd like to talk." Ethan glanced at Sophie. "Soph, go inside and start your reading." "But..." "Go on." Sophie went slowly, the way kids do when they know something's happening. She stopped at the door and looked back once. Victoria noticed. Victoria noticed everything about that girl in about 2 seconds, and something about it hurt her more than the board call had. "I'm going to say this badly," Victoria said, "so I'm going to say it fast. I laughed at you. In front of my entire company. Over $899. "Yes, ma'am. Since then, I have spent $3,412,000 making the problem worse." Ethan didn't react. "I'm not here to tell you that so you'll feel vindicated," she said. "I'm telling you because if I don't say the number out loud to somebody who understands what it means, I'm going to lose my mind." "That's a lot of money," Ethan said. "It's a lot of money." "It's not the worst part, though." Victoria looked up. No, ma'am." Ethan leaned back against the truck. "The worst part is, you've got a room full of people who all knew it was the wrong road, and not one of them said so. That's what's actually broken over there. The car's just the part you can see." Victoria was quiet for a second. "That's the second time you've told me that," she said. "And the first time I sent you home." "Yes, ma'am." She held out the folded paper. Ethan didn't take it. "It's a check," she said. "It's for $100,000. Come back with me, right now, tonight. Name any conditions you want." And Ethan Walker looked at that piece of paper for a long, long moment. He had $411 in checking. He had a field trip due Monday. He had a daughter inside that house doing her reading at a table with one short leg propped up on a folded matchbook. $100,000. "No," he said. Victoria's hand stayed out. "I'm sorry. No, ma'am." "You haven't heard the conditions." "I don't need to." Ethan pushed off the truck. "You didn't come out here because you think I'm right. You came out here because you're out of options. Those aren't the same thing, and I've spent enough of my life being the last option." "Mr. Walker, you want to know what the $899 was?" He turned around. "It wasn't a price, it was a question. I was asking whether you'd hear a number from a man in a t-shirt without checking his resume first. And you answered it, loud, in front of 100 people." Victoria's arm came down. "Now you're back with 100,000, Ethan said, and the answer's still no because that's not respect either. That's just a bigger checkbook pointed at the same problem." "Then what do you want?" "Nothing." He shook his head. "That's what nobody up there understands. I didn't want anything. I wanted $899 and to be home by 6. Victoria stood in the gravel with $100,000 in her hand and no idea what to do with her face. "He set me up," she said. Ethan stopped. "Marcus," she said. "He knew who you were when he called you. He knew about the papers. He knew about 2016. He knew you'd built the architecture the whole car sits on, and he walked you into my building and introduced you as a guy who does brake pads on Route 71. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she hated it. "He wanted me to laugh at you. So I'd never let you near it. Ethan was very still. Say that again, he said. Slow. He removed your name, March 11th, 2016, revision 10. He signed it himself. Victoria took a step closer. There was an ethics complaint. It went to a 3-person committee. He sat on it. He dismissed it. The wind moved through the open bay. Somewhere down the road, a dog was barking. Ethan said quietly, I filed that complaint on a Tuesday. I know. I never heard back. Not one word. Not a letter, not a call. He looked past her at the road. I sat in my apartment for 4 months, waiting on a phone call from a committee that had already voted. I know. My wife was sick that year. Victoria's breath caught. She got sick in the fall, Ethan said. And I was so busy being angry about a footnote that I missed the first 3 months of it. He looked at his hands. So I quit. I quit everything. I came out here and I bought a shop with a leaking roof, and I told myself the reason I left was because they didn't respect me. He looked up at Victoria Sterling. That's not why I left, he said. I left because I was ashamed. Nobody said anything for a while. Then Victoria Sterling did something no one in her company had ever seen her do, which was sit down on the bumper of a 2009 Silverado in a $4,000 skirt. I need help, she said. I know you do. I'm not asking as a CEO. I know. I don't know how to ask any other way, she said. Nobody ever taught me. My father died and they handed me a company, and I learned in about 6 weeks that the second you look uncertain in that building, somebody starts writing your replacement's name on a napkin. Ethan almost smiled. That's true of most buildings. So how do you do it? Do what? Not need them. Victoria looked up at him. You walked out of a room where 100 people were laughing at you, and you didn't argue, and you didn't come back, and you didn't post anything about it, and you didn't call a lawyer. You went home and made dinner. How? Ethan thought about it for a long moment. Because there's a kid in that house who watches how I take it, he said. That's all. That's the whole trick. There's no philosophy in it. Inside the house, the screen door creaked. Sophie stood in the doorway with a book in her hand, and her chin up in a way that was pure 11 years old. Are you the lady who laughed at my dad? Victoria stood up fast. Sophie. Are you? Soph, Ethan said. That's enough. No, Victoria said. No, it's fair. She took a breath. Yes, I am. I laughed at your father, and I was wrong, and I've spent 3 days finding out exactly how wrong. Sophie considered this with terrible seriousness. He fixes everything, she said. I'm starting to understand that. He fixed Mrs. Alvarez's van for free because she cried. Sophie. He did. The girl looked at her father, then back at Victoria. So if he says he can fix your car, he can fix it. He doesn't say things he can't do. And then she went back inside and let the screen door bang. Victoria stood there in the gravel with her eyes wet and a $100,000 check crumpled in her fist. Mr. Walker. Ethan looked at her. I'm going to go home now, she said. And I'm going to come back tomorrow. Not with a check. Not with an offer. She swallowed. I don't know what I'm going to come with, but I'm going to come back. Miss Sterling. She stopped. Bring the version history, Ethan said. The real one, not the summary. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Why? Because if he changed a document in 2016, Ethan said, he's changed one since. Men like that don't do it once. Victoria Sterling drove 11 miles back into the city with her hands shaking on the wheel, and at 9:15 that night alone in her office with the lights off, she pulled the changelog on the vehicle's calibration profile and scrolled back past the panic, past the flashes, past 3 weeks of desperate men doing the same thing harder. She scrolled back 4 months, and there it was. One entry, one approval, one name, and a timestamp from a Sunday at 2:14 in the morning when nobody in that building had any business touching anything at all. The entry was time-stamped, 2:14 in the morning on a Sunday, and Victoria Sterling sat and looked at it for a long time before she touched anything else. Approval code, Hale M change type calibration parameter revision. Scope thermal tolerance band primary and secondary loops. She opened the parameter itself. The old value was there in gray. The new value was there in black. The difference between them was 4%. 4%. She stared at that number until it stopped looking like a number. At 9:52, she called Priya Raman, and Priya picked up on the second ring, which meant Priya had not been sleeping either. Tell me what a 4% widening of a thermal tolerance band does. There was a pause on the line. Ma'am, where are you seeing that? Answer the question first. On paper, nothing, Priya said. On paper, it gives you headroom. You'd do it if you were failing a validation gate and you needed the car to stop throwing faults during testing. And off paper, you just told every module in the vehicle that a temperature it should be worried about is fine. Priya's voice was climbing. They all self-correct against that band, all of them independently over time. It's not a break, it's a drift. It's like giving 100 people a ruler that's a hair too long and telling them to build a house. How long before it fails? Months. It would take months. 4 months. The line went quiet. Ma'am, Priya said, where are you seeing that? At 10:30, Priya was in the building, and by 10:44 she had the changelog open on the big screen in the empty boardroom, and she had stopped talking entirely, which Victoria was learning was how that woman panicked. Say something. I'm reading. Priya. I'm reading, ma'am, because if I say it before, I'm sure I can't unsay it. At 11:06, she sat back in the chair. It's the whole thing, she said. It's not a contributing factor. It's the whole thing. Everything we've done for 3 weeks has been treating symptoms of a parameter that was changed in March. Then why didn't it show up in this diagnostics? Because diagnostics compare the vehicle to the reference profile. Priya turned the laptop around. And ma'am, look at the reference profile. Victoria looked. I don't know what I'm looking at. That's the master. That's the golden copy. That's the file the entire validation system measures everything against, and it's supposed to be locked, and it is locked except. Priya scrolled. Except it was updated on March 14th. By automated sync, triggered by the parameter approval 3 days earlier. Victoria's mouth went dry. So when they compared the car to the reference already had the lie in it, Priya said. Every single time we flashed that car back to reference, we weren't restoring it. We were pushing it further in. We've been trying to cure a man by giving him more of what's killing him, and we've been doing it for 22 days, and we've been billing it as progress. Victoria stood up and walked to the window and stood with her back to the room. $3,412,000, she said. Yes, ma'am. And the answer's been sitting in a changelog the whole time. It's a 140,000-line changelog, Priya said. Nobody reads a changelog during a crisis. You read a changelog during an audit. And who orders the audit? Priya said very carefully. The chief technical officer. At 11:41, the phone rang, and it was Warren Pike, and Victoria knew before she answered that 73-year-old men do not call at 11:41 to say hello. Vicky. Warren. Emergency session. Tomorrow, noon. Victoria closed her eyes. Who called it? Doesn't matter. Who called it, Warren? 4 signatures, Warren said. You need 3 to call it. You want me to say the names, or you want to save yourself the trouble? Say them. He said them. The 4th one was Marcus Hale. Victoria did not react, which surprised her. He's moving, Warren said. He's got a slide deck. I've seen the slide deck, honey, and I'm telling you, as the man who's supposed to run that meeting, it is a good deck. 22 days, $4 million. No vehicle. A CEO who by his account has been chasing a mechanic around Travis County, instead of running her company. Is that what he calls it? That's what it says on slide 9. Victoria laughed, and it came out ragged. Warren, he broke the car. There was a silence. Say that slower. March 11th, 2:14 on a Sunday morning. He widened a thermal tolerance by 4% to get through a validation gate, and it drifted the entire vehicle for 4 months, and then he pushed the same lie into the master reference file so nobody could ever measure it. She was shaking again. I have the log open in front of me. I have his approval code. Warren Pike was quiet for what felt like an hour. Can you prove the intent? I can prove the change. That's not what I asked. No, Victoria said. I can't prove the intent. Then here's what happens, Warren said, and his voice was the voice of a man who had sat in 400 of these rooms. You walk in there tomorrow, and you say your CTO sabotaged the vehicle, and he says it was a routine tolerance adjustment approved by the process, and he's got a director of validation who'll say the same, and 11 people around that table hear a woman losing a company blaming a man for it. That's the room, Vicky. That is the room. Then what do I do? You start that car, Warren said. That's it. That's the whole play. Nobody at that table can read a changelog, and every one of them can hear an engine. At 12:20 in the morning, Victoria stood alone in the boardroom with the lights off. Then she said out loud to nobody, "Okay." At 5:50 that morning, she was on Route 71 with a cardboard box on the passenger seat, and she had not slept, and she did not care. She parked on the gravel. The shop lights were already on, which she had not expected, and there was a radio going somewhere inside some country station, and a man singing about a truck. Ethan Walker came out wiping his hands with a rag and stopped when he saw her. It's 10 to 6 in the morning. I know. Miss Sterling, my daughter's asleep. I'll be quiet. Victoria pulled the box off the seat and held it against her hip. You told me to bring the version history, the real one, not the summary. Ethan looked at the box. That's a lot of paper. It's 410 pages. You print all that yourself? At 2 in the morning, yes. Victoria's chin came up. The machine on 40 ran out of toner twice, and I didn't know how to change it, and I sat on the floor and read the instructions off my phone. Something moved across Ethan Walker's face that was almost not quite a smile. Come on in, he said. Coffee's bad. The coffee was bad. He set the box on a workbench and pulled the lid off and started going through it, standing up one page at a time, and he did not talk for 11 minutes. Victoria watched his hands. That was the thing she kept coming back to afterward. She had spent her whole career watching people's faces, and it had taken her 32 years to learn that a person's hands are more honest. His hands were steady until page 140. Then they stopped. What? Victoria said. He didn't answer. He turned the page around and slid it across the bench toward her, and he tapped one line with a knuckle. It was a signature block. A digital one from 2015 scanned crooked with the rest. E. A. Walker. Objection filed. Thermal tolerance band. Do not widen. See attached failure modeling Appendix C. Victoria stared at it. You objected, she said. I objected. In 2015, I objected for 8 months, Ethan said. I ran the failure modeling myself. I ran it 4 ways. Every way I ran it. If you widen that band past 3%, you get cumulative calibration drift, and it doesn't show up for 100 to 140 days. And by the time it shows up, you can't find it because every module in the car has been quietly agreeing with the wrong number for 4 months. He set the page down. Nobody wanted to hear it. It cost 11 weeks on the schedule. And then they took your name off. Then they took my name off. He said it flatly. Which means the objection came off with it, because the objection was attached to the contributor record. Take the man out. The warning goes in the trash with him. Victoria put both hands on the bench. He knew, she said. Marcus knew exactly what happened when you widened that band because you told him, and he sat in the room, and then in March he did it anyway at 2 in the morning on a Sunday. Why 2 in the morning? Because that's when the validation lock releases for the weekly sync, Victoria said. It's a 9-minute window. You'd have to know it was there. Ethan nodded slowly. So he didn't panic, he said. He planned. How was failing a gate? If he'd failed it, he'd have had to report a hardware issue to the board and pull in the exact people he spent 10 years keeping out of that program. Victoria's voice was thin. He thought he had a year. He thought the car would be delivered and celebrated, and by the time it drifted, it would be somebody's warranty problem. And instead it drifted 11 weeks early. Yes. Why? Victoria opened her mouth and stopped. "I don't know," she said. "I don't know why." Ethan looked back at the page for a moment. "I do," he said. "Then tell me." "Not yet." "Mr. Walker." "Miss Sterling, I've been wrong exactly twice in my life about a machine, and both times it was because I said it out loud before I put my hands on it." He closed the box. "I'll tell you in your building." Victoria's heart went sideways in her chest. "You're coming." "I'm coming." "Why?" "Because you drove 11 miles at 5 in the morning with 400 pages you printed yourself," Ethan said. "That's not a check. That's work. I can work with somebody who does work." Victoria found she couldn't speak for a second. "Conditions," Ethan said. "Anything." "Don't say anything. Say them back to me after I list them and mean it." "All right. 1. Every person in that engineering department is on the floor when I open it. Not a conference room. Not a live stream. On the floor, standing where I can see their faces. Done. 2. Nobody touches that vehicle from the minute I walk in. Not a cable, not a laptop, not a hand on the fender. If somebody so much as leans on it, I stop and I go home. Done. 3. He looked at her. Marcus Hale stands in the front. Victoria's breath went out of her. He's called an emergency board session for noon. Then he'll be late for it. Mr. Walker, if he's in that room, he will stop me. He has authority I can't strip in 6 hours. He can pull the floor for a safety review, and I cannot legally override a safety hold that is written into our charter because my father wrote it in after a man got hurt in 2009. Then he'll pull it, Ethan said. And every one of those 111 people will watch him do it, and they'll all go home and think about why. Victoria stared at him. "That's the play," she said slowly. "That's not a condition. That's the play." "Miss Sterling, I spent 4 months waiting on a committee that had already voted." Ethan picked up his father's toolbox off the floor. "I'm not doing that again in private." "And 4. He set the box on the bench. $899. Victoria closed her eyes and laughed, and it turned into something that was not quite a laugh partway through. "Cash or check?" "Check's fine. I'm not proud." There was a sound in the doorway. Sophie stood there in pajama pants and a school t-shirt with her hair going 11 directions, and she looked at the lady and she looked at her father, holding his toolbox at 6:10 in the morning, and she got it immediately. "You're going." "I'm going." "Is it the car?" "It's the car." Sophie considered this. Then she walked over and took the rag out of his back pocket and handed it to him properly folded, the way she'd been doing since she was 6. "Don't forget to ask for the money first," she said. Victoria Sterling turned her face toward the wall. At 8:38, they pulled into the underground garage at Sterling Motors, and at 8:41, a security supervisor stepped in front of the elevator with a printed sheet in his hand and would not move. "Miss Sterling, I can't let him up. He's my guest." "Ma'am, I've got a badge hold issued at 6:15 this morning. Legal and technical both signatures. Individual is flagged as a competitive intellectual property risk." The supervisor's ears were red. "I don't like it either. I got told if I let him through, I'm terminated on the spot." "Who issued it?" "You know who issued it." Ethan set his toolbox down on the concrete and said nothing at all, which somehow made it worse. Victoria took out her phone. "Warren, it's 8:40 in the morning. Marcus has flagged Ethan Walker as an IP risk and locked him out of my building 4 hours before a board session he called." There was a pause, and then Warren Pike said a word that a 73-year-old chairman should not say before 9 in the morning. "Is Walker standing there?" "He is." "Put him on." Victoria handed the phone over. Ethan took it. "Mr. Walker, this is Warren Pike. I'm chairman of this board. Did you ever sign a non-compete with this company?" "No, sir." "Did you ever sign a non-disclosure?" "In 2013, 5-year term." "So it expired in 2018? "Yes, sir." "Are you currently employed by, retained by, or in negotiation with any competitor of Sterling Motors?" "Mr. Pike, I did a water pump on a Corolla yesterday." Warren Pike laughed once like a shot. "Put the guard on." Ethan handed the phone to the supervisor. The supervisor listened for about 40 seconds, went from red to white, said "Yes, sir," 3 times, and handed the phone back. Then he stepped out of the way. "He said to tell you he's coming in early," the supervisor said. "He said to tell you he's bringing his own coffee because ours is undrinkable." At 9:05, they walked out onto the showroom floor, and 111 people who had laughed 3 days earlier did not make a sound. Ethan set his toolbox down about 4 feet from the front bumper. Then he turned around and looked at all of them. "Morning," he said. Nobody answered. Then somebody near the back, one voice said, "Morning," and then a few more, and it was ridiculous, and it broke something in the air, and Priya Raman put her hand over her mouth. "I'm going to need 4 things," Ethan said. "First, I need somebody to print the calibration change log for the last 6 months and tape it to that wall. All of it. Page by page. I don't care how much wall it takes." Priya said, "That's 140,000 lines. Then get help." 11 people went for the door at once. "Second, nobody touches this car, not for any reason. If it catches fire, let it burn, and I'll take responsibility for that in writing." Nobody laughed. "Third," he looked at the crowd, "where's Mr. Hale?" The room shifted. "He's upstairs," somebody said. "Then somebody go get him," Ethan said, "because I'm not opening this car without him standing where I can see him." At 9:26, Marcus Hale came onto the floor. He came in slow jacket on, hands in his pockets, and he had put on the face. Victoria had watched him put on that face in 100 meetings and had always thought it was calm. She understood that morning that it was not calm. It was a lid. "Well," Marcus said, "this is theater." "Probably," Ethan said. "You understand you're standing on my floor?" "I understand I'm standing on Miss Sterling's floor." Marcus's mouth tightened. "Victoria, I want it on the record that I consider this reckless. This vehicle is in an unknown fault state. We have no idea what it'll do when someone starts pushing current through it, and this individual has no current certification, no insurance, and no clearance." Noted. "I'm not finished. I'm invoking a safety hold under Charter Section 11. The floor went dead quiet. Victoria said, "You can't do that." "I can, and I have." The email went out at 9:18. Marcus almost sounded sorry, which was the obscene part. "You want to override a safety hold. You need a board vote, and there's a board session at noon, so by all means, raise it there." Ethan bent down and picked up his toolbox. Victoria's stomach dropped. "Mr. Walker." "It's all right." "It is not all right, he just—" "Miss Sterling." Ethan looked at Marcus Hale for a long moment. "He's not stopping me from working. He's stopping me from working in front of people. That's the whole thing he's ever done." He put the toolbox back down. "So I'll just talk instead. That's not a safety issue, is it, Mr. Hale?" Marcus said, "Talk about what?" "About what happened at 2:14 in the morning on Sunday, March 11th. The lid came off Marcus Hale's face for about a quarter of a second. A quarter of a second is a long time in a room with 111 engineers in it. "That's a maintenance window," Marcus said. "It's a 9-minute maintenance window," Ethan said. "It's the only 9 minutes in the week when the validation lock on the master reference profile releases for sync. There's maybe 6 people in this company who know that window exists. I know because I helped write the lock in 2014. Priya Raman said out loud without meaning to, "Oh my God." During that window, Ethan went on, somebody widened the primary thermal tolerance band by 4%. And then 3 days later, the automated sync pushed that widened band into the master reference file, which means from March 14th onward, this company has had no true copy of what this car is supposed to be. Somebody at the back said, "That's why the flashes made it worse." "That's why the flashes made it worse," Ethan agreed. "Every time you restored to reference, you restored to the lie. You've been walking a man deeper into the woods every time you tried to walk him out." The noise that went through that room was not a gasp. It was worse than a gasp. It was 111 people, all realizing the same thing at the same time, and half of them saying it to the person next to them. Marcus raised his voice for the first time in 11 years. "This is a fabrication. It's a log entry. It is a routine tolerance adjustment signed under a documented process. Then why at 2 in the morning on a Sunday? Ethan asked. Because that is when the window is. Yes, Ethan said. That's my point. Silence. At 9:44, the doors at the far end opened, and Warren Pike walked in with a paper coffee cup, 73 years old, moving like a man who had decided something in the car. Don't stop on my account, he said. Marcus is your hold in writing. It is. Good. Withdraw it. Warren with respect. Withdraw it, son. I'm protecting the company. Then you'll be delighted to know I pulled the board on the drive over, Warren said, which I am entitled to do in an emergency posture, and I have 7 of 11, and 7 of 11 says this man works. So your hold is a piece of paper in an inbox, and I would like it gone by the time I finish this coffee, which is going to be soon, because it's terrible. Marcus Hale did not move for a long moment. Then he took out his phone and typed for 8 seconds and put it back in his pocket. It's withdrawn, he said. Thank you. For the record, I want it noted. It's noted, Marcus. It's all noted. Everything in this room is being noted by 100 people with excellent memories. Warren turned to Ethan. Mr. Walker, my apologies for the last 4 days and for the last 10 years. Do your work. At 9:51, Ethan Walker opened his father's toolbox for the first time inside that building. There was no laptop in it. There was a laptop in a canvas bag over his shoulder, an 8-year-old machine with a cracked corner, and he set that on a rolling stool. Out of the toolbox came a cable hand made with heat shrink at both ends. That's not a standard interface, somebody said. No, Ethan said. It's a pre-production diagnostic harness for a distributed thermal architecture. There were 9 of them made. I made 4. He plugged into the port, and the room leaned in about 6 inches altogether. Miss Sterling, question. Yes. Your father's filing cabinet, the beige one on 40, is it still there? Victoria blinked. How do you know about that cabinet? Because I watched him put it on a truck in 2014 when they remodeled, and I heard him tell the movers that if they scratched it, he'd fire the whole company. Ethan didn't look up from the screen. Third drawer. There should be an archive drive in a brown envelope, about the size of a paperback book, gray with a red sticker. What's on it? The last clean image of the master reference profile before I left, Ethan said. March 2016. I gave it to him myself the week I resigned. He asked me for it in the parking lot. Victoria Sterling stood absolutely still. He asked you for it, she repeated. Yes, ma'am. Why would he ask you for it? Ethan finally looked up. Because he believed me, he said. About the tolerance. He believed me the whole time. He just couldn't stop it, and he knew somebody was going to need the clean copy someday. Victoria put her hand over her mouth. Priya was already running for the elevator. At 10:09, Priya Raman came back onto the floor, holding a brown envelope with a red sticker on it, and she was crying and not doing anything about it, and she handed it to Ethan Walker like it was a living thing. He opened it, slid the drive out, turned it over once in his hand. Then he plugged it in. All right, he said. At 10:11, he pulled up the true reference profile beside the corrupted one, and he lined them up, and every screen on that floor mirrored what he was doing, and 111 engineers watched 2 columns of numbers scroll side by side. For 9 lines they matched. On the 10th, they didn't. Somebody said, there. There. Ethan agreed. He kept scrolling. 11 more mismatches. Then 40. Then 106, cascading outward from one parameter like cracks running out from a stone in a windshield. At 10:14, Ethan Walker sat back on the rolling stool and put both hands on his knees. I know what's wrong with your car, he said. The floor did not make a sound. It's not broken. Nothing in it is broken. There isn't one bad part in this vehicle, and there never was. He turned and looked at Victoria. 4 months ago, somebody told it that 4% hotter was fine, and it believed him. Everything in here believed him, because that's what these systems do. And then it spent 131 days quietly rebuilding itself around a lie, until it couldn't agree with itself about anything anymore. And then it did the only honest thing left. Which was what? Victoria said. It stopped. Nobody breathed. 11 minutes. $3,412,000, 3 weeks. 280 engineers, 6 software firms, and 3 consultants from Stuttgart, and a man in a gray t-shirt with a 40-year-old toolbox had found it in 11 minutes. Warren Pike set his coffee down on the floor. Marcus Hale was already walking toward the doors. "Mr. Hale," Ethan said. Marcus stopped. "You're going to want to stay for this part," Ethan said, "because I'm about to tell them the one thing you and I both know that nobody else in this room does. And I'd rather say it with you standing there than behind your back. You never gave me that courtesy. I'm giving it to you." At 10:16, Marcus Hale stood 20 feet from the door with his back to the room, and he did not turn around. "Say it then," he said. "Turn around first." "I can hear you fine." "They can't see you fine," Ethan said. "That's the difference." Marcus turned around. 111 people were looking at him, and Warren Pike was looking at him, and Victoria Sterling was looking at him, and not one of them said a word. In the spring of 2016, Ethan said, "This company offered me the chief technical officer position." The floor made a sound like a room full of people sitting down at once, except nobody moved. "That's a lie," Marcus said. "Robert Sterling offered it to me on a Thursday in the parking garage on level 2, standing next to a green pickup truck that had a dent in the tailgate," Ethan said. "He offered it because he'd read my failure modeling on the thermal band, and he understood exactly what it meant, and he told me the only way to get that band held at 3% was to put somebody in the chair who'd hold it." Victoria's hand had come up to her mouth again and stayed there. "I said no," Ethan said. "Nobody breathed. I said no on the Friday. I said no because my wife had been sick since October, and I'd already missed the first 3 months of it arguing about a footnote, and because I'd looked at myself in a mirror that week, and I did not like the man who was more upset about a citation than about a diagnosis." Ethan's voice did not rise. "I resigned 11 days later, and on the way out Robert asked me for the clean archive, and I gave it to him, and he shook my hand and said, and I remember it exactly, he said, 'Somebody's going to need this, and it's not going to be me.'" He looked at Marcus Hale. "You got the job on a Monday," he said. 3 days after I turned it down." Marcus said nothing. "Did you know?" Ethan asked. "Know what?" "That you were second." The lid came off all the way, and it did not go back on. "Of course I knew," Marcus said. "Of course I knew. Everybody in the executive corridor knew. There was a memo, Walker. There was a memo drafted with your name on it that had to be pulled and rewritten over a weekend, and I have spent 10 years in a chair that was built for somebody else." Somebody at the back said quietly, "Oh. That's what this was," Victoria said. Marcus's head turned toward her. "That's what all of it was." Her voice was shaking, and she let it shake. "The name off the document. The complaint you buried. 10 years of you telling me in every single conversation about outside expertise that the independent people were amateurs and the academics were useless, and everything we needed was already in this building. That was never a philosophy, Marcus. That was a lock on a door. You have no idea what I built here. You widened a tolerance at 2 in the morning. I was failing a gate." He said it too loud and heard himself say it and did not stop. "Do you know what happens when a CTO reports a fundamental thermal architecture issue 11 months before a global reveal? They don't fix the architecture. They fix the CTO. They bring in the outside people, and they bring in the man who wrote the paper, and by Christmas, I'm a line item on a reorganization chart." "So you moved a number." "I moved a number 4%, Marcus said. 4%. On paper, it's nothing." "It was never on paper," Ethan said. At 10:23, Marcus Hale did the thing that men like Marcus Hale always do at exactly that moment, which is stop defending and start pointing. "Fine," he said. "Fine. Then explain something to me, Walker, since you've got the room." "Go ahead." "By your own modeling, that drift takes 100 to 140 days to surface. March 11th to now is 131 days. He spread his hands. "But this vehicle didn't degrade gradually. It went down hard in one night 3 weeks ago. That's not drift. That's an event. So before everybody in this room decides I'm the devil, somebody should ask what happened on the night of June 29th, because I've read that log too, and there are 41 manual parameter writes on this vehicle that did not come from validation, did not come from Stuttgart, and did not come from me. The floor went cold. They came from an internal account, Marcus said. A junior integration account. And I have been sitting on that for 3 weeks because I did not want to end a career over it. And if we're doing honesty this morning, then let's do all of it. He turned and looked directly at Priya Raman. Priya had gone the color of paper. "Ma'am," she said. "Ma'am, I." "Don't," Marcus said. "Don't make it worse." Victoria said Priya. "I did it," Priya said. The whole floor moved. "I did it. I did 41 of them. I did more than that. I did about 60 across 4 months, and I never told anybody, and I know how it looks." Her voice cracked in half, and she kept going anyway. "In March, the thermal numbers started reading strange to me. Not wrong. Strange. Like something in the band didn't sit right. And I raised it. I raised it twice in the integration stand-up, and I was told the reference profile is the reference profile, and if the car matches reference, then the car is fine." "Who told you that?" Victoria said. Priya didn't answer. "Who told you that, Priya?" "Directorate," Priya said. "It came down from Directorate." Marcus said, "That's not an accusation, that's a policy." "So I started hand correcting," Priya said. "Just the cells that read hot. Just a little. Just enough to keep the modules honest against what I thought the real number should be. Because I couldn't prove anything, and I couldn't stop anything, and it was the only thing I could actually do with my hands." She looked at the floor. "I know it was unauthorized. I know I could be walked out for it. I've had a resignation letter in my drafts folder since April." Nobody said anything. Then Ethan Walker started laughing. It was not a mean laugh. It came out of him low and surprised the laugh of a man who has just found the last piece of something on the floor under a bench, and every person on that showroom floor turned and stared at him. "Say that again," he said. Priya blinked. "What part?" "The part where you fought it." "I don't." "You fought the drift," Ethan said. "For 4 months, by hand, every week, alone." "Yes, Miss Sterling." Ethan turned around on the rolling stool. "You asked me yesterday morning why it failed 11 weeks early, and I told you I wouldn't say it out loud until I had my hands on it." Victoria's voice was barely there. "Say it now." "It failed early because she was in here every week putting the true number back into a machine that was being told a lie by its own master file," Ethan said. "Every correction she made pulled a module back toward honest. Every sync pushed it back toward the lie. So instead of 111 modules drifting together in one nice smooth wrong direction, you had modules disagreeing with each other hard in both directions for 4 months. That's not drift anymore. That's a fight. And a fight breaks sooner," somebody said. "A fight breaks sooner," Ethan said. He stood up. "Do you understand what she did?" he asked the room. "Because I want to make sure everybody in here understands what she did. If she'd done nothing, if she'd been a good employee and left it alone, that band holds together for another 11 weeks. It holds through Saturday. It holds through the reveal. It holds through the press drives." The floor had gone completely still. "You had 140 journalists scheduled for track time on Monday," Ethan said. "I read the schedule in the lobby. This vehicle would have gone out at 180 miles an hour on a closed circuit, with a reporter behind the wheel in July in Texas, with a thermal management system that had spent 4 months quietly agreeing that 4% hotter is fine." Somebody said, "Jesus." "And then it would have found out it wasn't," Ethan said. Priya Raman put her hand on the workbench because her legs had stopped working properly. "She didn't break your car," Ethan said. "She made it break at the only time in the next 6 months when breaking it wouldn't have killed anybody. She did it without permission because she wasn't given any, and she did it for 4 months in a building where she'd already been told twice to stop looking. And if there is one person in this company who should never be walked out of this building, it's her." At 10:31, 111 engineers started applauding on a showroom floor, and it went on for a long time, and Priya Raman stood in the middle of it with both hands over her face. Marcus Hale was not applauding. "Warren," he said. "Warren, this is." "Marcus," Warren Pike said. "Son, stop talking. I want council present. You should want counsel present. That's the smartest thing you've said this morning. Warren took out his phone and did not look up from it. Legal's already on their way down, so's HR. I sent for both of them at 9:50, which is about the time you invoked a safety hold to keep a man from plugging in a cable. I want it noted that at no point did I intend. It's noted. I want it noted that everything I did was inside process. Warren finally looked up. Marcus, I'm 73 years old, and I have watched a great many men explain themselves in rooms like this one, and I'm going to tell you the same thing I told all of them. Intent is what you say afterward. Process is what you hide behind. What you did is what's in the log. He put the phone away. You are relieved of your operational authority effective now, not fired. That's not mine to do alone, and you'll get every hearing the charter gives you. But you don't touch a system in this building again, and you don't stand on this floor. Marcus Hale looked around at 111 people. Not one of them looked away, and not one of them looked at him either. They looked through him, which is worse. 10 years, he said. Yes, Warren said. That's the tragedy of it. You were good son. That's the part nobody's going to remember. Marcus Hale walked out at 10:37, and the doors closed behind him, and the room let out a breath it had been holding for 3 weeks. At 10:39, Victoria Sterling said, "How long do you need?" Ethan was already sitting back down. "Depends what I find in the next 10 minutes. You have until Saturday at 9. I know what time the reveal is, ma'am. It's on a banner in your lobby that's 4 stories tall." Somebody laughed, and it was the first honest laugh in that building in a month. At 10:44, Ethan pulled the clean reference image off the archive drive and hit the first wall. "Huh," he said. Victoria's head came up. "That's not a good huh. So the frame fits and the furniture doesn't." He rubbed his jaw. "I can't just push this in. If I flash a 10-year-old profile into that car, every module in it wakes up tomorrow morning speaking a dead language. Then what do? We don't push it in. We use it as a witness." Priya was already at his shoulder. "You want to diff every current parameter against the 2016 clean values and rebuild by hand." "That's right. That's 4,100 parameters." "That's right. That's..." Priya did the arithmetic out loud, and her voice fell off a cliff halfway through. "Ma'am, that's 20 hours of work minimum, and that's if nobody makes a mistake, and everybody makes mistakes at hour 14. "Then we won't do it in 20 hours, Ethan said. "We'll do it in 6. "How?" He looked up and turned the stool around and faced the room. "Because there's 111 of you," he said, "and every single one of you has spent 3 weeks being told what not to touch." At 10:52, the floor turned into something Victoria Sterling had never seen in her own building. Ethan split it into 11 groups. Each group took a subsystem. Each group got a printout of the 2016 clean values for their subsystem, and a printout of what the car currently believed, and one instruction which he gave once, standing on a rolling stool so the back could hear him. "You are not fixing anything," he said. "You are not improving anything. Nobody makes a decision. You find every place where the car disagrees with this paper, and you write it down, and you bring it to me, and I decide. If you think you've spotted something clever, that's wonderful. Bring it to me and don't touch it. Clever is what got us here." Somebody near the front said, "What if the paper's wrong?" "Then I'm wrong, and you'll get to say so in front of everybody, and I'd rather find out from you at 11 in the morning than from a reporter at 180 miles an hour on Monday." They went to work. At 11:20, Victoria came back onto the floor with a phone against her ear and her jaw set. "That was the board," she said. "They're still meeting at noon." They met at 11. Warren moved it up. She lowered the phone. "It's a 9-2 vote to proceed to Saturday. That's not a great margin." "It's a hell of a lot better than it was at 6 this morning." "What'd you tell them?" Victoria was quiet for a second. "I told them the truth," she said. "All of it. I told them we broke it ourselves, and I told them a junior engineer caught it 4 months ago and got told to be quiet, and I told them the man fixing it is the man I laughed at on Monday over $899. "How'd that land?" Warren said, and I'm quoting him. He said, "Well, at least somebody in that building can count." At 12:05, the first real problem hit. Mr. Walker. Go. Battery management won't accept a parameter right. The engineer's name was Cole32 and his hands were not steady. It's rejecting the whole block. It's like it doesn't recognize the authority. Because it doesn't. Ethan didn't look up. It's locked to reference and reference is the corrupted master. It won't take a value that disagrees with what it's been told is God. So we're stuck. No, we're annoyed. He put his pen down. You can't argue a module out of its reference. You have to give it a new one. Priya. Here. We're going to have to rebuild the master profile itself, and we're going to have to do it before we can write a single value into that car. Priya went pale again. The master's locked. Hardware lock. It releases 9 minutes a week. When? The room did the math together, and about 40 people said it at once. 2:14 Sunday morning. Victoria said, that's 20 hours after the reveal. Nobody said anything. There's no manual release, Victoria asked. None anywhere. There's a physical override, Priya said slowly. It's a keyed interlock in the validation vault. 2 key holders has to be simultaneous. Who holds them? Chief Technical Officer. Priya swallowed. And Chief Executive. At 12:11, Victoria Sterling stood in front of 111 people and said the sentence she had been dreading since 10:37 in the morning. I need Marcus. At 12:40, Marcus Hale came back down to the showroom floor with a lawyer walking beside him, and the room went so quiet you could hear the elevator settle. He looked at Victoria. He did not look at anybody else. You need my key. Yes. I'm relieved of operational authority. You're relieved of authority, Warren Pike said. You still hold the key until the board votes you out, which is Tuesday. That's the charter. Your charter, incidentally. You argued for that provision in 2019. Marcus almost smiled at that. It was not a nice thing to watch. And what's in it for me? Nothing, Victoria said. That's an honest answer. You'll get better ones from lawyers. She stepped closer. Here's what I've got. If that car doesn't run on Saturday, this company is finished, and 1,100 people lose their jobs, and every single one of them will spend the rest of their lives telling the story of the year they worked at Sterling. And you'll be in it, Marcus. You'll be in every version of it forever, as the man who wouldn't turn a key. Marcus stood there. Then he said to nobody in particular, he was right, you know, in 2015. Nobody answered him. I read the failure modeling 4 times, Marcus said. 4 times. And I could not find a hole in it, and I remember exactly where I was sitting when I understood that he was right, and that being right was going to cost us 11 weeks and cost me the only thing I had left, which was looking like I'd been right the whole time. He looked up. And I want it on the record that I did not decide anything that night. I want that on the record. I sat at a terminal for 40 minutes at 2 in the morning, and I did not decide to do it. He stopped. Just what? Victoria said. I just typed it, Marcus said. It took 9 seconds. The floor did not make a sound. That's how it happens, he said. That's the whole thing. People think there's a moment where you choose. There's no moment. There's a keyboard and a bad week and 9 seconds. He held out his hand to the lawyer who put a key card in it. Let's go turn it, he said. At 1:14, the interlock released, and the master reference profile came unlocked for the first time in 4 months, and Priya Raman and Ethan Walker began rebuilding it line by line off a 10-year-old archive drive that a dying man had asked for in a parking garage. At 3:30, they were 40% through. At 4:50, they were 60, and Cole from battery management fell asleep sitting up, and nobody woke him for 11 minutes. At 5:15, somebody's wife brought barbecue for 100 people and refused to be paid for it. At 6:00, Victoria Sterling took off her shoes on her own showroom floor, sat down on the concrete with a stack of printouts, and started reading thermal values out loud, so Priya wouldn't have to look away from her screen. At 6:40, a girl in a school t-shirt walked in holding a lunchbox. Nobody had told the guard to expect her. Dale had walked her up himself. Hey, Sophie Walker said. Ethan turned around. How'd you get here? Mrs. Alvarez drove me. She held up the lunchbox. You didn't take anything. You never take anything when you're working on something big, and then you get a headache, and you get grumpy, and you blame the weather. Somebody in the back of that room laughed so hard they had to put a hand on a workbench. Sit over there, Ethan said. Don't touch the car. I know. Say it. Don't touch the car, Sophie said, and went and sat on a stool by the wall with her homework and worked on fractions for 2 hours next to $5 million. At 8:44, they hit the last block. At 8:51, Ethan Walker sat back and put both hands flat on his knees, and the room noticed, and it went around that floor like a wave, and within 30 seconds, 111 people had stopped what they were doing. That's it, he said. That's it, Victoria said. Master's clean. Every parameter in it matches 2016 origin values corrected forward for 4 years of hardware. Car's been written. Every module in there is now reading off the same honest page for the first time since March 11th. So it'll start. So it'll try, Ethan said. That's not the same thing. It's been arguing with itself for 4 months. It's got to reconcile. That takes a minute or two, and I don't know what it's going to say. Warren Pike said, "What's the worst case? Worst case 4 months of bad calibration burned something in a cell stack that I can't see from here, and it throws a hard fault. And we find out we needed a part after all on a Friday night 13 hours before a global reveal. And best case." Ethan stood up and stretched his back, and for the first time in 4 days, he looked like a man who was actually 42 hours into being awake. Best case, it's just been waiting for somebody to tell it the truth, he said. At 8:58. Victoria Sterling walked to the driver's door of a $5 million prototype and put her hand on it and did not open it. Mr. Walker? Ma'am. You do it. No, ma'am. Ethan. It's your car, he said. It's your name on the building and your father's name on the charter and your company's 1,100 jobs. I fix things. I don't get to press anything. Victoria stood there for a second. Then she said, Sophie. The whole room turned. Sophie Walker looked up from her fractions with a pencil in her mouth. What? Come here, Victoria said. Please. Ethan said, Miss Sterling. Your daughter told me in a driveway that you don't say things you can't do. Victoria did not take her eyes off the girl. I've had a lot of people tell me things in that building for 4 years. She's the only one who was right the first time. Sophie looked at her father. Ethan Walker looked at his daughter, and something in his face came apart very quietly, and he said, Go on, kid. At 9:02, an 11-year-old girl in a school t-shirt climbed into the driver's seat of a $5 million hypercar, with her sneakers barely reaching the floor, and 111 engineers moved in around that car without anybody telling them to. Both hands on the wheel, Ethan said. Foot on the brake pedal, that one. All the way down and keep it there. It's stiff. It's supposed to be stiff. Okay. Now the button. Not yet. He crouched by the open door. Soph? Yeah. Whatever it does, it's not you. I know, Dad. I mean it. If it doesn't start, that's mine. That's all mine. I know, Dad, Sophie said in the exact tone 11-year-olds use on fathers who are being ridiculous, and Priya Raman made a sound that was half a laugh and half something else entirely. All right, Ethan said. Press it. She pressed it. Nothing happened. For 1 full second. Nothing happened, and Victoria Sterling felt her whole life leave her body through the soles of her feet. Then the dash came up. Not all at once. Section by section, left to right, the way a house comes on when somebody walks through it, turning on lamps. Thermal. Battery. Drive. Chassis. Each one lighting, holding, and going quiet in that particular way. A system goes quiet when it has nothing to complain about. No amber. No red. Nothing. And then the car made a sound. It was not an engine sound. It was the low-rising, almost human hum of 1,100 pounds of battery and 4 motors coming up together into agreement, and it filled that entire floor, and it did not waver. Nobody cheered. That was the part Victoria remembered for the rest of her life. Nobody cheered. 111 people who had been humiliated for 3 weeks stood around that car in total silence and listened to it the way people listen at a hospital door. Sophie said very quietly, "Dad, it's on." "I hear it, baby." "It's on." And then somebody in the back screamed and the whole floor went up like a stadium. At 9:04 on a Friday night, 111 engineers were hugging strangers on a showroom floor, and Cole from battery management was crying without any embarrassment whatsoever. And Dale, who had been in that building 26 years, sat down on an equipment case and put his face in his hands, and Warren Pike stood in the middle of it, holding a coffee cup that had been empty since 10 in the morning. Priya Raman found Ethan Walker at the edge of it and could not get a sentence out. "You did that," he told her. "In April, alone. I just read the paper." At 9:11, Victoria Sterling pulled the door open and Sophie climbed out, and the girl looked up at her and said, "It's really loud in here." "Yes, it is." "Are you gonna cry?" "I'm considering it. My dad says it's allowed if you did the work." Victoria Sterling laughed, and then did exactly that in front of her entire company, and not one person in that building ever thought less of her for it. At 11:30 that night, when the floor had mostly cleared, and the car was still humming because nobody could stand to shut it off, Victoria found Ethan sitting on the concrete with his back against a workbench and his daughter asleep sideways across 2 folding chairs with his jacket over her. She sat down on the concrete next to him. "I want to offer you something," she said. "I figured. Executive Vice President of Engineering. You'd report to me and nobody else. Full authority over architecture validation and any program in this building. 750 base. Equity. A team of anybody you want." Ethan was quiet. "Before you answer," Victoria said, "I want to say I'm not doing this to fix Monday. I know I can't fix Monday. I'm doing it because I watched 111 people follow a man they laughed at on Monday, and I've been running this company 4 years, and they have never once followed me like that. They followed you today. They followed the work today. That's the only thing worth following," Ethan said. She waited. "No," he said. Victoria nodded slowly. She'd known. She'd known in the driveway. "Can I ask why?" "Because that job is a chair," Ethan said. "And every man who's ever sat in that chair in this building has spent his whole time in it protecting it. That's not because they were bad men. It's because that's what the chair does." He looked over at his sleeping kid. "I sat in a room today and watched a very smart man explain how 9 seconds ruined 10 years. I'm not going to pretend I'm made of something he wasn't. So what do I do with you?" "Hire the shop." "What?" "Hire the shop," Ethan said. "Walker Auto Route 71. Outside consultant, no title, no office, no badge. I come in when you call me. I look at whatever you point me at. I tell you what I think, and here's the part that matters, ma'am, and this is the whole deal." He turned his head. "I can't be fired for what I say." Victoria understood it in about a second and a half, which was how fast she'd once decided who he was. "Priya said it wasn't her place," she said quietly. "That's right. You want to be the man whose place it always is." "I want somebody in that building to be unscarable," Ethan said. "It doesn't have to be me, but it's got to be somebody, and it can't be somebody whose mortgage you hold." Victoria sat with that for a long moment. "Done," she said. "You'll want that in writing." "I'll have it in writing Monday." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "What's your rate?" Ethan Walker reached into his back pocket, pulled out the little carbon invoice book, clicked a pen and wrote for 6 seconds, tore the sheet off, handed it over. Victoria unfolded it. Then she started laughing and had to press her hand over her mouth so she wouldn't wake the kid. $899. At 11:52. That night, Victoria Sterling signed the invoice on the concrete floor of her own showroom, using a workbench as a desk and 111 people's paper cups as a paperweight, and then her phone rang. She looked at the screen. She almost didn't answer. "This is Victoria." "Miss Sterling, it's Dana Coyle. I write for the trade desk. We've spoken twice. It's midnight. I know. I'm calling anyway because I'd rather call than not call." A pause. "I have a document. It came into my inbox at 9:40 tonight from an anonymous account. It's a changelog entry from March 11th, and it has your chief technical officer's approval code on it, and it's annotated. Victoria closed her eyes. Annotated by who? That's what I'd like to ask you. Because whoever sent this to me also sent a 5-page narrative summary explaining that the CEO of Sterling Motors personally ordered an unqualified outside individual to modify a prototype vehicle in violation of a standing safety hold 13 hours before a public reveal. That's what it says. That's what it says. And you believe it. Miss Sterling, I've been doing this 19 years. Dana Coyle's voice was flat and tired and honest. Anonymous documents at 9:40 at night are never sent by people who want the truth out. They're sent by people who want to be somewhere else when it lands. But the document itself is real, and I'm running something on Monday, and I'd rather run the right thing. Victoria stood up off the floor. Come to the reveal, she said. I'm on the list already. Come early, 7 a.m., come to the loading side and ask for Dale. Why? Because I'm going to tell you the whole thing, Victoria said, and I want you to hear it before you hear my version of it on a stage. She hung up and stood there in the half-dark, and Ethan Walker, who had not moved from the concrete, said, Marcus. Marcus. 9:40. He'd have been sitting in his kitchen about then. Yes. Ethan nodded slowly. He couldn't take the key back, so he took the story. At 1:40 in the morning. Ethan Walker carried his daughter out of the Sterling Motors building asleep over his shoulder with her sneakers in his other hand, and Dale walked them all the way to the truck without being asked. Mr. Walker? Ethan. Ethan. Dale opened the passenger door for him. I worked for her daddy 26 years. I know. He talked about you. Dale stopped moving. He what? He said the only two people in the building who'd tell him the truth were you and a woman named Rosalind in accounts payable. Dale stood in the garage at 20 to 2 in the morning and looked at the concrete for a while. Rosalind passed in 2019, he said finally. I'm sorry to hear it. Yeah. Dale cleared his throat hard. Y'all drive safe. At 5:05 on Saturday morning, 4 hours before 900 journalists were scheduled to walk through the door, the car threw a fault. Priya Raman called it in, and her voice was very controlled, which was worse than panic. Thermal cell stack bank 3 cell 19. Hard fault not soft. It came up during the overnight soak. Ethan was already pulling his boots on. Is it holding at fault or is it climbing? Holding. Then don't touch it. I'm 40 minutes out. Mr. Walker. Say it. Everybody here has been awake for 2 days, and they all just watched that thing come alive last night, and now it's throwing red at 5 in the morning, Priya said. I've got 2 people crying in the stairwell. I need to tell them something. Tell them the car is finally honest enough to complain, Ethan said. That's what I'd tell them. It couldn't tell us anything at all 4 days ago. He got there at 5:44. Howe was on his back under the rear of that vehicle for 22 minutes with a flashlight in his teeth. And when he came out, he sat up and said one word. Real. Victoria's stomach dropped. Meaning it's not calibration. That cell took actual damage. Sometime in the last 4 months, it sat too hot, too long, and something in it degraded, and it's been sitting there degraded ever since. And the only reason we're seeing it now is that the car is finally measuring the world correctly, and it doesn't like what it sees. Can you fix it? No. The floor went silent. Nobody can fix it, Ethan said. You don't fix a cell, you replace it. It's a 14-hour job with the right tooling, and we've got 3 hours and 15 minutes. Warren Pike, who had slept 4 hours in a chair in his own office at 73 years of age, said, Then what are our options, son? 2. Ethan stood up and wiped his hands. 1. You isolate Bank 3, you run the reveal on reduced power, and the car drives out on that stage at maybe 60%, which nobody in that audience will be able to tell, because nobody's doing a quarter mile in a ballroom. And 2. You cancel. Victoria said, What happens if we isolate it and I put a journalist in it Monday? Then I'll have had 2 days to replace the cell properly, and you won't be isolating anything on Monday, Ethan said. But I want to be extremely clear about something, ma'am, and I want the room to hear me say it. If you drive that car onto that stage at 60%, you have to say so. Say so. On the microphone, out loud, before it moves. Somebody from marketing made a noise like a man stepping on a nail. Absolutely not, he said. Do you have any idea what that headline looks like? Sterling reveals flagship at partial power. We'd be handing them the knife. Then hand them the knife, Ethan said. That's easy for you to say. You don't work here. That's right, Ethan said. That's exactly right, and that's why she hired me at $899, and if anybody in this building can't stand hearing it, they should be grateful somebody's finally getting paid to say it. At 7:02, Dana Coyle came in through the loading side, and Dale walked her up. Victoria met her on the showroom floor, with no lawyer, no communications director, and no notes. Before we start, Dana said, I want to make sure you understand that I'm not your friend. I'm counting on that. All right. Dana took out a recorder and set it on the workbench. Who broke the car? We did. Dana's eyebrows went up half an inch. Specifically, my chief technical officer widened a thermal tolerance parameter by 4% at 2:14 in the morning on Sunday, March 11th, during a 9-minute validation lock release in order to pass a gate he was failing, Victoria said. Then the change propagated into the master reference file, which meant that for 4 months this company had no true copy of what its own vehicle was supposed to be. Dana Coyle stopped writing. You're saying that on the record. I'm saying it on a stage in 2 hours. Miss Sterling. Dana set her pen down. I have to tell you as a person, and not as a reporter, that is the single worst idea I have ever heard in 19 years of this. Probably. Your board will lose their minds. 9 of them voted to proceed yesterday knowing all of it. Your lawyers will resign. 1 already did, at 6 this morning, by text message. Dana sat back. Why? She said. And don't give me a line. Why are you doing this? Victoria was quiet for a second. Because on Monday morning, a man walked into this building and told 111 people that the car wasn't broken. It was confused, she said. And I laughed at him. And I spent $3,412,000 proving him right. And the only reason nobody is going to die on my test track this week is that a 29-year-old integration engineer spent 4 months quietly correcting a number by hand after being told twice to leave it alone. Her voice did not shake. If I go out on that stage and give a speech about innovation, then everything that just happened in this building for 3 days means nothing, and by Christmas, we'll be exactly the kind of company that does it again. Dana Coyle looked at her for a long moment. The anonymous document, she said. Was that Hale? I believe so. Are you going to say that on stage? No. Why not? Because he's entitled to a hearing on Tuesday, Victoria said, and I've already been the person in this story who decided who somebody was before I had the facts. I'm not doing it twice in 1 week. At 8:40, 20 minutes before the doors opened, Victoria found Ethan by the loading bay, putting his toolbox in the bed of his truck. You're leaving. I'm going home. My kid's got a field trip Monday, and I've got a permission slip to sign and $42 to hand over. Ethan. He stopped. Come out on the stage, she said. No, ma'am. Not for a speech. You don't have to say a word. Just stand there and let 900 people see who did it. Miss Sterling. He shut the tailgate. If I walk out there, then the story is a poor mechanic who got recognized by a rich woman. That's a story people love, and it doesn't change one single thing, because next year there's another guy in a t-shirt in another lobby, and nobody's going to recognize him either. Then what's the story? The story's Priya Raman, Ethan said. Put her out there, because the thing that nearly killed this company wasn't a parameter. It was a room where a smart young woman knew the answer for 4 months and said, and I heard her say it out loud, it wasn't my place. He opened the truck door. You want to fix something permanent, ma'am? Fix that sentence. Victoria stood in the loading bay and watched a 1998 pickup pull out of the most expensive property in Travis County. At 9:14, Victoria Sterling walked onto a stage in front of 900 journalists, 400 employees, and a live feed, carrying 1,100,000 concurrent viewers, and she did not use the teleprompter. Good morning, she said. I'm going to do this differently than you're expecting. And I'd ask you to hold your questions until I'm finished, because you're going to have a great many of them. She let it sit for a second. 24 days ago, this vehicle stopped working. 6 days ago, we still did not know why. As of Thursday afternoon, this company had spent $3,412,000 replacing components that were never broken. The room made a sound she had never heard 900 journalists make before. We now know why, she said. It was us. At 9:19, on a live feed. The chief executive of Sterling Motors explained a 4% thermal tolerance change to 1,100,000 people in language a person could understand, and did not blame the weather, the supply chain, a vendor, a software partner, or a component sourced overseas. At 9:23 she said, "I'd like Priya Raman to come out here, please." Priya came out in a badge lanyard and yesterday's clothes and stood there like a woman walking into weather. 4 months ago, this engineer noticed something wrong in the thermal readings. She raised it twice. She was told by people senior to her that the reference profile was the reference profile, and if the vehicle matched reference, the vehicle was fine. Victoria turned. "Priya, was that the culture in my company?" Priya's mouth opened. 900 people waited. "Yes, ma'am," Priya said. The room went absolutely still. "Say the rest," Victoria said. "I." Priya looked out at all of them, and then she stopped looking at them. "I corrected the values by hand for 4 months because I didn't think I was allowed to say it out loud. I had a resignation letter in my drafts since April. And I want to say, because it matters, that the reason those corrections mattered is that they made the vehicle fail early. If I hadn't done it, this car would have held together until Monday, and one of you would have been in it at 180 miles an hour. Nobody in that room moved for about 4 seconds. Then somebody in the 5th row started clapping, and it went across 900 people like fire in a dry field, and Priya Raman stood on a stage and cried in front of the entire automotive press. At 9:31, Victoria said, "One more thing, and then we'll show you the car." She held up a piece of paper. "On Monday morning, an independent mechanic came into this building at the invitation of my chief technical officer. He looked at the vehicle for 53 minutes without touching it. He told my engineers that the parts were fine, that every module would bench test green, and that the failure was in the moment the car stopped agreeing with itself. He was correct on all 3 counts, and it took him under an hour, and he then handed me an invoice for a full diagnostic process." She turned the paper around. $899, she said. And I laughed at him in front of 111 of my own employees. I laughed at him because of what he was wearing. 900 pens stopped. "That man found the fault in 11 minutes on Friday morning," Victoria said. 11 minutes against $3,412,000 in 3 weeks. He is not here today. I asked him to come, and he refused, and he told me why. And I'm going to quote him, because I've thought about it every hour since. He said if I walk out there, the story becomes a poor mechanic recognized by a rich woman, and that story doesn't change anything, because next year there's another guy in a t-shirt in another lobby. She set the paper down on the podium. "So I'm not going to give you his name today. He hasn't given me permission, and he's earned the right to be left alone." She looked out at all of them. "What I'll give you instead is this. Effective this morning, this company has a standing rule that I have named after that invoice. Any employee at any level may escalate a safety or integrity concern directly to my office in writing with no supervisor in the chain. It cannot be blocked. It cannot be reviewed by the person it concerns. And it cannot be held against them ever in any performance review by anyone for any reason. Every escalation gets a written answer from me personally within 72 hours. Somebody near the front called out, "What's it called?" Victoria almost smiled. "The 899, she said. At 9:40 the car came out. It moved under its own power, and it moved on reduced output. And Victoria said so, before it moved exactly as she'd been told to, and the strangest thing happened. Nobody cared. The audio from that reveal circulated for years afterward, and the thing people always pointed to was the 11 seconds after she said the words at approximately 60% of rated output, because one battery cell was genuinely damaged, and I will not stand here and pretend otherwise. 11 seconds of 900 journalists not writing anything. and then applause that went on for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. At 12:20 that afternoon, Ethan Walker's shop phone rang. "How was signing a permission slip?" "Walker Auto." "Is this the 899 guy?" Ethan blinked. "Excuse me. Man, you're all over everything. Are you taking calls? I've got a fleet of 11 trucks and a diagnostic issue nobody in this county can find." By 2 o'clock, the phone had rung 91 times. By 4, Sophie was answering it with a spiral notebook and a pen saying, "Walker Auto, please hold," in the voice she used for grown-ups, with a line of names 3 pages long. By Sunday, there were 2 television vans in the gravel lot, and a man from Dallas offering to buy the shop outright, name intact, for $1.1 million. Ethan turned him down in the driveway in under 90 seconds. "Why?" Sophie asked that night. "Because he doesn't want the shop." "He said he wanted the shop." "I wants the name on the shop," Ethan said. "And in about a year he'd have 20 guys in matching shirts under it, doing $40 oil changes, and every one of them would be doing work with my name on it, and I'd have no say in any of it." He handed her a plate. "That's the same trade I already turned down on Friday, kid, just cheaper." At 8:00 on Tuesday morning, the board of Sterling Motors met to vote on Marcus Hale. He did not make them do it. He walked in at 7:52 with a single sheet of paper, put it on the table in front of Warren Pike, and said, "Effective immediately, no severance, no press statement. I'll cooperate with the internal review, and I'll sign whatever they need me to sign." Warren read it. "You could have fought this, son. You'd have lost, but you could have fought it, and it would have taken 11 months and cost this company $2 million. "I know." "Why aren't you—" Marcus Hale stood there in front of 11 people who had known him for a decade. "Because I sat in my kitchen on Friday night," he said, "and I sent a document to a reporter at 9:40, and it took me 9 seconds to hit send, and then I sat there for 4 hours. He put his hands in his pockets. 9 seconds again, Warren. Same 9 seconds. I did it twice in one lifetime. A man who does that twice shouldn't be near anything that matters." Nobody said anything. "Tell Raymond she was right," Marcus said. "In March. Tell her I read her escalation both times." He left. At 11:15 that same morning, in the parking garage on level 2, Ethan Walker was loading his toolbox into his truck after the first day of his consulting arrangement when a car pulled up behind him and stopped. Marcus Hale got out. Neither of them said anything for a while. "I'm not here to apologize," Marcus said. "You wouldn't want it, and it wouldn't be worth anything. Probably not. I want to know one thing." "Ask it." "Why didn't you fight in 2016? Marcus's voice was raw. "You had the modeling. You had Robert. You had the whole thing in your hand, and you walked out and you fixed water pumps for 10 years. I've thought about that for 10 years. Walker, and it never made any sense to me, and I want to know." Ethan set the toolbox down on the tailgate. "Because my wife was dying," he said, "and I was going to have to choose, and I chose." Marcus Hale stood very still. "I didn't know that." "No, you didn't ask." "Would it have changed anything?" Ethan thought about it honestly, the way he thought about everything. "No," he said. "But you'd have had to look at me while it didn't." Marcus nodded once. He got back in his car. Then he rolled the window down. "There's a filing cabinet on 40, he said. "Beige, Roberts, 3rd drawer all the way at the back behind the hanging folders. There's an envelope that's been in there since 2016. It's got your name on it. I found it in 2019, and I put it back, and I never told anybody." Ethan didn't move. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because it's the only thing left I can do that's worth anything," Marcus Hale said, and drove out of that garage and out of that story forever. At 2:30 that afternoon, Victoria Sterling sat on the floor of her office in front of her father's beige filing cabinet, with the 3rd drawer open, and Ethan Walker sat on the floor across from her, and between them was an envelope with E. Walker on the front in blue ballpoint. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked. "No, ma'am." He opened it. It was one page, handwritten, dated the 11th of May, 2016. Ethan read it silently, and Victoria watched a man's face change 3 times in 90 seconds, and then he handed it to her without saying anything, and she read it out loud, because he asked her to, in a voice that did not stay level. Ethan, you said no, and you were right to say no, and I want that in your hand, and not just in the air. A man who leaves a job for his wife is not a man who lost his nerve. He's a man who knew what the job was for. You told me the band cannot go past 3%. I've written it down in 4 places, and I've told legal, and I've told validation, and I've told the man taking your chair. Whether it holds after me is a different question, and I've made my peace with not knowing. I'm giving you the archive because you'll be the only one who can read it, if the day ever comes, and because I don't intend to be here. My daughter is going to run this company sooner than she thinks, and she is going to be very good at it, and very hard about it, the way I was hard about it, and she is going to learn the same thing I learned, which is that the most expensive thing in any company is the truth nobody is allowed to say. If she ever calls you go, even if she's rude to you, she gets that from me. Robert. Victoria set the letter down on the carpet and put both hands over her face and cried the way people cry when nobody has to be managed anymore. He knew, she said finally. He knew he was sick in May. He didn't tell me until August. Yes, ma'am. 4 months. She laughed wetly. Everything in this story is 4 months. That's about how long it takes a person to decide to say something, Ethan said. In my experience. At 3:10, she said, even if she's rude to you. He knew his kid. He absolutely knew his kid. 6 months later, on a Tuesday in January, Sterling Motors put the finished vehicle in a public exhibition hall in Houston, and 41,000 people came through in 9 days. The car was the second most photographed thing in the building. The first was a small brass plate on a stand beside it at eye level, where people had to walk past it to get to the rope. It read, "Never measure a person's worth by what they wear. Measure it by what they know." Under it, in smaller letters, "This vehicle was saved by an independent mechanic. We laughed at, and by a junior engineer we told to be quiet. We have printed this here so that we cannot forget it." By the 4th day, there were people standing in front of that plate, longer than they stood in front of the car. And by the 6th day, a docent had started counting, and the number she reported at the end of the run was that roughly 1 in 9 visitors photographed the plate and not the vehicle. Priya Raman was by then Director of Systems Integrity, a position that had not existed in April. She reported to nobody but Victoria. Her entire department had one mandate, which was to find things that were wrong and say them out loud. And in her first 6 months, she filed 19 escalations under the 899 rule, and Victoria answered every single one in writing, inside 72 hours, and 11 of them resulted in changes, and 4 of them made Victoria furious, and Priya filed the next one anyway. That was the whole point, and both of them knew it. Ethan Walker came into the building on Thursdays. He never took a badge. He signed in at the desk like a visitor every single week for years. And every single week Dale said, "You know, we can just give you a badge." And every single week Ethan said, "I know." He kept the shop. He hired 2 people, then 4, then stopped at 4 on purpose, and turned down $110,000 a year in overflow work rather than go to 6. "You'd make a fortune," a supplier told him once. "I'd make a fortune and I'd stop touching cars," Ethan said. "Then I'd be a guy who owns a shop. There's plenty of those." At the exhibition in Houston on the 7th day, a woman in her 60s stopped Victoria Sterling by the rope and asked her the question that had been asked 400 times in 6 months. Who was he, the mechanic? Everybody wants to know who he was. Victoria smiled. "He's a single father who runs a shop outside Austin," she said. "That's all I'm allowed to tell you." "Did he ever take the money? I heard he turned down a job." "He turned down the job 3 times, Victoria said. "He takes $899 a visit, and he has never once raised it, and when I offered to double it, he told me the price was the price, and asked me if I'd learned anything at all." The woman laughed out loud. "And had you—" Victoria Sterling thought about a man closing a toolbox on a marble floor, and about 111 people laughing, and about the 11 seconds of silence from 900 journalists when she told the truth on a stage. Yes, she said. "It just cost me $3,412,000 to learn it." That spring, Sophie Walker turned 12, and her father took her out for pizza on an actual Friday, and she informed him across the table that she had decided what she wanted to be. An engineer, she said. That's a lot of school. I know. That's a lot of rooms full of people who'll think you're the youngest person there and act like it. I know. And someday somebody's going to laugh at you, Ethan said. For something you're good at, something you know you're good at. Sophie put her pizza down and looked her father dead in the eye, 12 years old, entirely serious. Then I'll say my price once, she said. And go home and eat dinner. Ethan Walker had to look at the ceiling for a second. That's right, kid, he said. That's exactly right. The truth is that nothing about that week was ever really about a car. A man in a gray t-shirt walked into a building full of people who had every degree, every resource, every consultant, and every advantage that money can purchase. And he told them something true in the first hour, and they laughed at him because of his clothes. And it cost them $3,412,000 and very nearly cost them a life. He never raised his voice. He never chased them. He never argued once. He set his price. He set it a single time, and he went home to his daughter and let the world catch up on its own schedule. And it did the way it always does, because a lie in a machine will run for 131 days, and a lie about a person will run for 10 years, and neither one of them runs forever. Expertise does not need permission to exist. It only needs somebody honest enough to finally stop laughing and listen.